This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicoladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porque se cheated.
What was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and our subscribers. We're recording on Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. I am your host, Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today are my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. Well, because it's 2024 and nothing can ever come too easy, the Sounders went ahead and capped off their regular season with a very frustrating 1-1 tie against the Timbers. The Sounders jumped out to a 1-0 lead and were looking reasonably dominant through about 65 minutes until a seemingly innocuous turnover sent the Timbers on a counterattack, which Anthony finished off to make it 1-1. At that point in the game, the Sounders had outshot the Timbers 12-2. On the very next time down the field, Pedro de la Vega made an electric run that ended with a shot which was barely saved. While fighting for the rebound, Obed Vargas fouled Dario Zaparic and showed a bit of displeasure. Referee Ismir Pekmic deemed it over the line and showed Vargas a second yellow. The Sounders played reasonably well over the final 20-odd minutes despite being down a man, but neither team could find a goal. The tie meant the Sounders dropped to fourth in the Western Conference, lost the Cascadia Cup on a tiebreaker, and most annoyingly ran their home winless streak against the Timbers to 11 games. On the balance, I thought the Sounders played pretty well. They still finished with 57 points and a plus 16 goal difference. They're on a 7-game unbeaten run and are 12-2-3 during the second half of the season. These are undeniably good things, and yet there seems to be a pretty heavy cloud of doubt hanging over this team. Aaron, what do you make of both this game and sort of the general vibe, given that things have gone pretty darn well during the second half of this season?
Yeah, I'll start to be positive. I'll start with the general vibe. I feel good about the Sounders' chances in the playoffs. Nothing about this game changed that.
Okay.
Houston, I think, is a good team. I think the Sounders should handle them, especially having 3 games to spread out their bad luck over. And yeah, I mean, it's a bummer to finish fourth. I don't think this team is the fourth best team in the Western Conference. I think they're much closer to second or third. And it's a bummer, obviously, to not beat the Timbers in a game I think they should have beat the Timbers in. But I think, as we've been saying for quite a while now, I think the Sounders can beat anybody in the West except for LAFC. And I don't think they're incapable of beating LAFC. I just need to see them do it before I'm truly going to believe it. I think they've got a good chance on making a run. Do I think they're going to, if they do make that run, do I think they have a great chance of beating Miami in Miami? Probably not. But,
or
they
Columbus in Columbus, I suppose.
Well, they've already done that.
Right. Yeah.
Slightly different circumstances than the MLS Cup final would likely be. But yeah, I feel pretty good about the team. I feel pretty good about how things are shaking up going into the offseason. I think there's a really, really strong team already to build on. They've rescued what looked like the most miserable season in franchise history for the first couple of months. I was pretty well convinced that Brian Schmetzer was done. I thought there was a good chance they were going to have to completely blow this team up, and they've fully convinced me that they've got most of what they need to be a cup contender, and not just a team that I feel like could make a run at a cup, but a legitimate cup contender, and a team that I think could be really fun to watch in the Club World Cup next summer. And so, yeah, I feel really good about it. I think this was always probably going to be a transitional year. I know that the expectations were high coming into the year. The pundits really liked this team. I really liked this team, but I think in hindsight, with that being 2020, there were some issues that they needed to figure out that just took them a while to figure out. That was always going to make it difficult for this to really be a supporter shield type year. But I think they got those issues figured out, and I think crucially, the guys that have been so critical to this team are coming back next year most likely, and are not guys you're going to expect to have that much of a drop off. This game specifically sucked ass. It was awful to deal with, to watch.
Yeah.
I said in the Discord that this game kind of reminded me of the Open Cup semifinal loss to LAFC, where I thought the Sounders played really well. I thought that they got legitimately screwed by a bad refereeing performance. And it doesn't make me feel any better because of the context of everything else that's happened in this rivalry over the last couple of years. I mean, I think that this would be a lot easier to swallow if it weren't for the Sounders being winless in 11 at home against the Timbers. It would be a lot easier to swallow if this didn't mean missing out on the Cascadia Cup. I think that the Sounders were clearly much better than the Timbers. And, I'm not a this is the ref's fault guy. And there were certainly opportunities for the Sounders to score that you would like them to take advantage of. But nothing you can say is going to convince me that if Obed Vargas doesn't get sent off, that the Sounders aren't going to go on and win that game. I think that they're clearly going to go on and win that game. They almost went on and won the game even with him getting sent off. And it sucks. Pekmich should not have been the center ref in that game. It was a horrible performance. Wasn't just the Obed Vargas call, just an awful performance.
Yeah. Well, let's start there. And I think I would like to think we've earned the right, for lack of a better term, to complain about a ref every now and then, because we are, I think, pretty even keeled when it comes to talking about referee performances. And even in this game, I'm perfectly happy to say that the referee didn't cost the Sounders this game. They had plenty of opportunities to win this, regardless of Vargas getting sent off. The chance that De La Vega has right before that I alluded to in the intro, right? I spoke about in the intro. That was a great chance. I don't know if they think he should have finished that, but it was, that was a great chance. Jordan Morris had two really good chances. Wasn't able to finish either one of those. There was more, actually it was funny. I went back and rewatched the game yesterday, and I was surprised at just how good the Sounders look. And usually on rewatch, I'm able to watch it with an emotional distance and not be sort of in my feelings again. And I was surprised how much in my feelings I still was rewatching it, in part because it was so close to being a signature type of performance. It wasn't necessarily the best chance, but Nuhu nearly scoring that would have been a wonder goal on the play right before that. Albert Rusnak has a really good look at goal. There's a lot of chances in there. But on rewatch, the other thing that stood out to me was just how bad Pekmich was. He was awful. And it's almost from the very beginning. I think in the first minute, Mascara tugs down an attacker from behind, and it's called a foul, but he's not warned. There's no it's like that probably should have been a yellow early. I think it was in the first or second minute. I realize that you don't want to give a yellow that early, but that sort of sets a tone for the things that players are able to get away with. As the match goes on, there's numerous instances of players very visibly dissenting on calls. Mascara again in the 23rd minute does almost the exact same thing that Obed Vargas ends up getting kicked out for. Dario Zuparic on a breakaway just trucks Pedro de la Vega and then gets all animated about being upset that the foul was called. Nothing there. And that was another incident. And then there was also a bunch of these instances where the referee didn't play advantage, even though there was a very clear advantage. There was two that were like 3-on-2 breaks or 4-on-3 breaks where the Sounders are running forward with numbers. And for some reason they don't play advantage, which was baffling in real time and is even worse on the rewatch. But it was just a very, he falls for sort of soft fouls repeatedly going both ways. And then even after the red card to Obed, Jonathan Rodriguez gets even more animated about a call than Vargas did. And again, not even so much as a warning, a verbal warning, let alone a card. The Sounders ended up, I think, having 5 yellow cards at one point to 0 for the Timbers. Yep. The Timbers ended up getting 2 towards the end of the game. One of them was on the bench, but it was an awfully reffed game. And I would have a hard time imagining that Pro would grade Pekic well, although I do think he ended up getting a playoff game, which I don't know, maybe speaks more to the body of his work, but it was genuinely one of the worst refereed games that I can remember from the Sounders. And we don't like to talk about refereeing a lot on this show for a variety of reasons, but this one stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and normally I feel like when we do talk about refereeing, we talk about, there was a bad call and it really screwed the Sounders, but ultimately it was just not a well refereed game and both sides benefited and both sides suffered. And I don't think that was the case in this game. I think that it was so clearly slanted in the Timbers' favor for whatever reason.
Oddly, yes.
And I know that, there used to be, there was I think pretty well substantiated rumor that one of the things that referees were trained on was don't let, crowds in places like Seattle impact your performance and don't let them pressure you. But it's not like Seattle is an intimidating place to play right now necessarily for referees. And I don't know what it could have possibly been, because it was 5 yellow cards to 0 at one point. And the Timbers had at that point 3 more fouls than the Sounders.
Yeah.
That's just, I don't understand how that's possible. There's no way that you as a referee can look at that and say, yep, I was right. That I made all of the right decisions here for it to lead to that. Paul Rothrock gets put in a headlock and gets in the guy's face a little bit, gets a yellow card for it. Got to put him in a headlock, no yellow card. Just countless examples in this game, and it was just so frustrating to watch.
Well, and it seemed like to me, again, this is on my rewatch, is that probably from really the whole second half up and especially right around the 60th minute or so, the game starts to amp up in terms of its intensity. There's more chirping at the referee. There's more intensity. There's the incident with Rothrock and Evander and a couple other players where both teams are getting preheated, and so on some level I understand the referee's mindset of saying, okay, I need to do something to control this. But part of the reason that the match was in the state that it was he was having such a hard time controlling it. And there were many moments where it felt like a card here or a card there would have helped sort of bring the temperature down. But when the cards are so unbalanced, it's not going to bring the temperature down. It's giving a sense that this is being uneven. And that's really what leads to players sort of taking matters into their own hands. I do think that one of the things that was pretty hard to escape is, to me, it looked a lot like the referee probably forgot that he had just carded Obed a few minutes earlier for, I think, actually appropriately delaying a restart.
100%. Yeah.
And that one's on Obed. I think that's 100% on Obed. He's not in a place where he needs to do that. And then I guess conversely, there were several incidents where the Sounders could have sort of done the same thing, where the Timbers were delaying a restart and they didn't sort of kick the ball into the defending player, which in Obed's case, he lunges at he makes a play at the ball. Like I don't really know what he thinks he's doing there, other than sort of like being petulant. But the Sounders had kind of plenty of chances to be kind of like pull their own shithousery and draw, at least try to draw a yellow. But I don't know. It was a very frustrating game on a lot of levels. I will say that I saw this chatter a few different places. I'm not trying to pick on any one person, but there seems to be this narrative building that the Sounders just don't care as much about this rivalry, and that's part of why it's become so lopsided, at least at Lumen Field. And I would really challenge anyone that has that opinion to watch not just this game, but the two previous games. I don't think a lack of passion or fire was at all what the Sounders' problem was. I think they maybe lost their composure a few times throughout this rivalry, although really maybe only in this game. And I don't even know if I would totally say that.
I think you can make a pretty decent case that the emotion of the rivalry led to Leo Chu getting sent off in last year's game.
Sure.
At Lumen.
Yeah.
Like I think that was a huge part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree. Yeah. And so I don't think that's the problem. I do think that there's an element of just randomness and inexplicable. There's something inexplicable about what's going on at Lumen Field in terms of this rivalry. The Sounders were the better team. They had the better game plan. They were executing it better. And they just they couldn't convert the chances. And I guess that brings me to my next point. You know, we were a couple weeks ago, maybe even last week. I don't remember exactly what we said, if we said anything about it last week, but we've been pretty high on Jordan Morris for the last 4 or 5 months. I think rightfully so. He's been very good. I thought he was mostly okay in this one, but he had at least 2 really, really good chances in this one. He doesn't finish either one of them. You can argue that Pentemis makes decent saves both times, but I do think you can, it sort of continues this sort of run that he's had where he's not scoring goals against the Sounders' biggest rivals or in their biggest games. And I guess, I don't know, how much attention should we pay to that?
I think that it's impossible not to notice, right? Like, I think the fact that he hasn't scored against Portland or LAFC is a noteworthy fact that you can't really escape. The question is whether you think it's predictive, if there's something inherent to the moment that he is not up to. And I just think that there is a lot of evidence that he has scored big goals in big games throughout his career. It makes me think it's just, I lean towards it's a statistical fluke. I think that you can't score in every game, and sometimes patterns happen. I think it's similar to the looking for explanations for why the Sounders can't win at home. A lot of it is just random luck, right? Against the Timbers, right? There are elements to the rivalry that I think are a factor. They have at times matched up really poorly with Portland. But I think it's also just randomness, right? In search of an explanation. And I think that that's most likely what Jordan not scoring against the Timbers or LAFC comes down to. But I don't blame anyone for not finding that explanation satisfactory. I think that it's, strikers are confidence players. And I think Jordan has a reputation, not entirely unfair, although in my opinion, overstated, of being a guy who needs to be high on confidence to be effective. So maybe that's a factor, right? Like maybe he's pressing too hard in these games, but I don't know. I think that he's just as likely to score in the next game out against Portland or LAFC as he is in any other game, frankly. Maybe not against LAFC because LAFC's defense is so good, but
I will say that the thing that is encouraging about Jordan's play overall is that in the past, when he's sort of hit these cold streaks, and I don't want to overstate it, he hasn't scored in 4 games. It's not like he's fallen apart, but what he has been able to do is be dangerous, at least. Like there's been, for a lot of his career, when he would sort of go into these cold streaks, he'd sort of disappear and not be super involved in games and not really be putting any, like, really impacting them. And he was dangerous in this game. He was putting himself in dangerous spots. He came very, he probably had 3 decent looks at chances. One of them he wasn't able to get anything on. There was a great run that Obed Vargas made shortly before he got ejected. They put a cross through the box. Actually, it wasn't that clear. It was in the second half, and Morris maybe could have made a little bit better play on it, but Paul Rothrock's at the back post, and he ends up not getting quite around it and puts it wide. But that was, I guess I bring it up because I think Jordan was dangerous in this game. I thought he was impactful. He just wasn't. He didn't finish his chances, and that's frustrating. But that he's still getting himself into these positions. If you're getting yourself into dangerous positions, I'm a guy who believes in, it's going to even out. Like you're going to finish at the rate that you're probably going to finish at. It's about how many chances you can create, and he's getting chances. So I wouldn't say I'm worried about him. I do think that to the degree that there were doubts before he went on this run, those doubts are going to persist until he is scoring big goals in big games on a regular basis. And I do think that a performance like this potentially does influence what kind of player the Sounders look for. I'm not necessarily defending that position, but I do think it sort of emboldens folks both inside and outside the organization who say the Sounders need a number 9 who can score in these games. The folly, I think, is you can't really program for that.
Right.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, Obafemi Martin's never scored in the playoffs. Freddie Montero didn't score in the playoffs. Right. I was
Jordan has
bitching
8 playoff goals, it should be said.
Right. And several huge playoff goals. I was bitching about this mindset when Freddie Montero was on the team, right? This idea that he just isn't capable of doing it in the big games, because there's just not a lot of evidence to back up the idea that that's a thing, right? It's just randomness looking for a narrative, and people are happy to slap one on it. But I'm just one man, and I don't have the power to dictate the Sounders roster decisions. So if that's why they make the decision to pursue a 9, then what am I going to do about it, right?
Right. I will say one positive is, sort of a similar knock has been on Albert Rusnak. He does pick up the assist in this one on a corner, no less. The Sounders have sneakily gotten pretty good on corners. They aren't necessarily scoring a ton, but they are scoring a lot off set pieces. And this was, again, an example of them dialing one up and being able to score in ways that they certainly weren't scoring last year. And I thought that's encouraging. That was his 16th assist in the regular season. That ties him with Nico Ladero for the most assists in a single season for the Sounders. He also has 19 assists across all competitions. I believe that is a record for all competition assists. He also has 10 or 11 goals across all competitions. I think that makes him just the second Sounder to hit 30 all competition goals and assists in a season. Obafemi Martins is the other player. He finished on 32 in 2014. So it's entirely possible that Rusnak is going to end up with the most productive season in Sounders history. Today we actually talked to him at training, and he on his own brought up that, this was a contract year for him. I asked him if, what the status of that is, and he seemed to be comfortable with the situation. My understanding is that he wants to be a designated player. He expects to be a designated player. I think it's tough to argue that he doesn't deserve to be one. I think where the negotiations are going to come in is the Sounders, I think, are going to try to convince him to not be a designated player or to be on a max TAM with the hope of bringing someone else in. I have no idea how that's going to go. Like, I really don't know. I don't know how likely they are to be able to sell him on that. But I think the Sounders are going to try. So we'll see. But I mean, at this point, I think you're really making a pretty risky gamble if you let him walk over. Like, I think it's fine to negotiate if you can convince him to get below max or of automatic DP, more power to you. But I think the Sounders are pretty limited to negotiating in the faith of, we want to be able to add even more. Will you help us? I don't think they're going to be able to play hardball and say, if you don't sign as a max TAM, we're just going to have to let you walk. I think that would be a huge mistake by the Sounders, because I don't think you can. I mean, it's beyond any reasonable hope that you're going to bring in a guy to replace his 30 goal contributions.
Yeah. Unless the thing is that the only scenario in which it makes sense to let him walk is exactly who you want to replace him with, and you are extremely confident you can get them signed. If you can do that, why even offer him the max TAM deal? Just say, hey, thanks,
sure, exactly.
Thanks, man. Go get paid somewhere else. There's always the possibility that a player cares more about, getting a ring or whatever it is, and is willing to take, a pay cut or a hometown discount or whatever you want to call it in order to facilitate that. I think you tend to see that more in sports where guys are making 20, 30, $40 million over, the life of a contract, or even in a single year, than where, guys are making $2.5 to $3 million.
And it's probably his last big contract. That's the other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't hurt to ask, right? And maybe that is more important to him. If I were him, I would definitely say, hey, I'm a designated player. I know what I'm worth, and I'd love to be here, but you're going to have to pay me what I'm worth. Because to me, the hometown discount still makes him a DP based on the way he's performed this season. And he knows he's going to be able to get more than he's getting now on the open market, I would assume. Right. So,
I mean, I would think he can reasonably go into the open market and expect a raise on his current salary, which is about $2.2 million. Like, it wouldn't be shocking to me to see any number of teams come in and offer him $2.5 million, especially teams who aren't likely to go out and spend transfer fees on 3 designated players. Like, if you can get a 10-10 guy without having to pay a transfer fee, there are a lot of teams in this league who are more than happy to do that.
Yeah. And I guess the question I have is, are the Sounders committed to having only 2 designated players and, taking the benefits that you get from operating that way? Because if they are, they need to let Rusnak walk and go pay a transfer fee and get a prime time type player. If they're not, you've still got room to add that guy if Albert's a DP. So yeah, like you said, there's no harm in asking, but if they want him back, they need to be prepared to give him a DP spot, I think.
Yeah, and I would say I'm feeling good about this matchup with Houston. I don't know. I honestly don't know if this is a better or worse matchup than if they had gotten Minnesota United, which is who they would have gotten if they finished third. Minnesota United has been, aside from the Sounders, probably the hottest team in MLS over the last couple months. The Sounders have a great record against Minnesota, but it does, to me, it feels like a very tenuous sort of dominance that they've had over Minnesota. It's not like they're blowing Minnesota out of games, and like they just beat them 3-2 a couple months ago, and that was a back and forth game. Could have gone either way. The Sounders beat them twice at home earlier this year. That was really a different Minnesota United team. They, ever since the summer transfer, ever since Yeboah has gotten integrated into their team, they've been much, much better. So instead, they'll play Houston Dynamo, another team that they have dominated historically at home. I don't think they've ever lost to the Dynamo at home. I believe they have a 7-game winning streak at Lumen Field against the Dynamo. And I don't know, they haven't exactly been blowing the Dynamo out either, but it kind of feels like a good matchup for them in that the Dynamo want the ball and they aren't going to just sit back and defend. And that's who the Sounders have mostly struggled against. So and they aren't necessarily a team that's going to beat you on the counterattack. They're going to beat you more through, good possession. They do have some dynamic players. They didn't have to. I don't think they played Hector Herrera either time they played him this year. They didn't have to play against Ezekiel Ponce, who is their new designated player. So there's definitely some challenges with Houston. But I mean, if you can't beat Houston, you're not winning MLS Cup. That's for sure.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that this is a matchup I would be pretty nervous about if they were going into it and it was one leg. It's one win or go home. But I think over 3 legs, I think the Sounders' talent advantage is going to get them where they need to go. Houston is a good team, though. I mean, I think that there's a handful of teams in MLS that are just always kind of there. It's easy to overlook them when they're actually legitimately pretty good. And I think Houston is legitimately pretty good. It's going to be a tough series. I doubt the Sounders get out in 2 games, especially having to go down to Houston, although they have been pretty mediocre at home this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel as good about this as I think I would pretty much any team they could have plausibly gotten. I would feel much better about playing Vancouver, right? But I still feel pretty confident in this one. And like you said, if they're not going to beat Houston, they're not going to win the MLS Cup.
And I guess the bummer of the draw, to the degree that to this degree, is that they ended up on the same side. Like for a long time, it looked like, okay, finishing 4th wouldn't be so bad because at least they would avoid LAFC, because it looked like LA Galaxy were gonna win the league or win the Western Conference, and they were up until the 101st minute of their game against Houston Dynamo, where Daniel Stairs ends up scoring a miracle goal to tip the Galaxy right at the end there, and it flips the standings. So LAFC ends up winning, finishing first in the Western Conference. And so that means that the Sounders would most likely play LAFC in the Western Conference semifinals. And I don't know, I think we've talked about this a lot, but it does kind of feel like, look, LAFC is the team you have to go through.
Yeah.
Why not just get it over with early? And I'm not loving the idea of having to go to Bank of California Stadium, or BMO, I guess it's called BMO now. You may as well, right?
Right. And here's the thing that bothers me more than anything about this scenario that the Sounders are in, right? Is that, let's say a miracle happens and LAFC gets knocked out of the first round. More than likely, that means you're playing Portland in Seattle. So you avoid LAFC, and you've got the other thing that frankly has been a pain in the ass for a lot longer than LAFC has.
Yeah,
the Sounders have not. LAFC didn't exist the last time the Sounders beat the Timbers at home.
Oh my God, you're is
now,
that right? No. That was the same year.
2017. Was it the same year?
That was your first year at LAFC.
Okay. Well,
I get a fair point though. And honestly, I think I might rather play at LAFC than host Portland in the Western Conference semifinals, even though on paper I'm sure the Sounders would be the favorites against the Timbers at home. But
I've come to terms with LAFC knocking us out of the playoffs.
Yeah,
I cannot deal with Portland knocking us out of the playoffs.
It would be an unbearable offseason to get knocked out. And honestly, beating them would not really. It'd be like, okay, so what? You beat the number 9 team. Like, there's not going to be there's no. It is. I will say that's one of the most frustrating things about the Timbers rivalry is that I don't feel like this is a two-way street, like trash talk thing, because when we beat the Timbers, it's sort of like, yeah, you're supposed to beat the Timbers.
Yeah.
When you don't, it's like the end of the world.
Right. Yeah, it does kind of suck. I mean, that's the curse of high expectations, right? But
yeah.
It is a bummer to not feel like we can enjoy the wins as much.
No, it's been a really weird. I mean, I guess it's been like this for a while, but it like I feel like after every loss the Sounders have had, and they haven't had a lot recently, feels like the world is collapsing. And admittedly, that's partly because they had 2 losses in the second half of the season. One was against Portland, one was against LAFC. They had 3 ties. Houston, okay, that was fine. But then there was the tie against the Earthquakes at home, which, by the way, that did end up costing the Sounders seeding, like we predicted it would. And then there was this tie. And, so like 4 of those 5 instances of drop points in the second half of the season were painful for one reason or another. They were not mundane dropped points. They were dropped points that came with all sorts of annoying ass narratives.
Yeah, I mean, if you give the Sounders another 4 points, they're comfortably in third place, right? And they should have had those 4 points. Like, there's no question in my mind that they should have had those 4 points. And it's, every season there's a handful of results that were close that you can point to and say, oh, if they'd had that, they would have been. But I think in this case, it's San Jose at home. It's the Timbers at home, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got to hang on and hold on to the points.
And I think what's also frustrating about this is, let's just say we were to flop the results against the Rapids and the Timbers in these last few weeks, right? If the Sounders had tied the Rapids, no one would have been upset about that. It would have been fine.
No, because it was away, right?
Right, it was away. And if you have a 1-1 tie against the Rapids and you have a 1-0 win over the Timbers, you're effectively in the exact same position, with the difference being that you win the Cascadia Cup and you still finish 4th. But I feel like the emotions around like the Cascadia Cup is not why the emotions would be better. It would just be getting the monkey off your back of beating the Timbers. Right. And I don't know, I guess maybe in that sense, maybe that's what they need to exercise this, is they need to beat the Timbers in the playoffs. But man, the downsides there feel way too high. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what to make of this. I do think the Sounders, I like the Sounders' chances in the playoffs as much as, really ever. Which is to say, I don't know, I'd probably give them something like a 5 to 10% chance to win this thing.
That's about as good as you're going to get, honestly. I mean, it's this season, as I've been saying for a while, this season kind of reminds me of 2019 in a lot of ways. And nobody gave the Sounders a chance to beat LAFC and LA in 2019 either. And they did.
I mean, I would say the Sounders were much, much bigger underdogs going into LAFC in 2019 than they would be this year.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to overstate how good LAFC were in 2019.
Yeah. One of the best teams in MLS history, without question.
Yeah. You know what? I think you're right. I think LAFC came into the league in 2018.
Yeah, I'm almost positive it's 2018.
I think I think
it was.
Yes, now that I think about it, because I'm pretty sure that they had their great season their second year. But
2017 was the last time the Sounders beat Portland at home, and that was the last time Portland won the West in the regular season. Crazy how that works, right? Maybe Portland has to be good for us to.
Maybe that's the key.
Yeah.
But the other knock on from the Vargas card was that he's now unavailable in the first game against Houston, and that's a lot of people have asked that you can't appeal. First of all, you can't appeal. I don't think you can ever appeal yellow cards, But
Yeah.
in this case, the Sounders really wouldn't have any grounds for it because I think most agree that by the letter of the law, it's well within the referee's discretion to card Obed there. It's just in the way that the game was being refereed, and it's sort of like you don't want to see a referee throw a player out for dissent, especially when he's not like in his face. The referee was 30 yards away, and it didn't look like Obed said anything particularly egregious. So
yeah, there was definitely like an undercurrent after the game of, well, you don't know what he said. He could have said something horrible. And I'm pretty sure that if that had been the case, the referee would have mentioned something about it in his bullshit statement that he gave after the game in response to your question. That was you, right? That asked that. You were the pool reporter.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. So
I didn't want to get. Actually, I don't mind getting into it. That was another annoying thing. I submitted a question to the referee, and I just basically said, "What was the difference between Obed's dissent and all the other instances of dissent?" And he said, "Obed dissented."
Right.
Like he did it because I said it was worse because I said it was worse. That's why.
The level of disdain that MLS referees have for any questioning of their decisions does not befit their place in the world of referees.
No, and I do think that MLS referees are generally better than folks give them credit for.
Sure. But a lot of referees in more high profile sports are much more willing to explain their decisions.
Way more. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. There's, we see this in virtually every other American sport where the referees have some accountability in that they are asked to answer questions. And, it's not on a written piece of paper. It's like an actual interview. And, the way that the system used to be set up was that you would submit a question and then you would have an opportunity to talk to the referee if they felt like it. And usually the referee would decline. But at least there was an opportunity. I think as much as I don't want to have to go interview referees when I could be interviewing players or coaches, I do think the system would work a lot better if even if you had to submit your questions beforehand, if there was a mandatory sort of like opportunity to interview the referee and ask him follow-ups.
Like I understand why a referee is not analogous to a coach or a player, and why saying, well, if the players have to explain things, coaches have to explain things, why don't the referees? I don't think that that's a perfectly analogous situation, but it is just because I feel like there are certainly cases. I don't think this is one of them. I don't think there's anything you could say to me that could convince me that the yellow card there was the right decision. But there's certainly cases where there's probably a totally reasonable explanation for why a referee makes a call that's controversial. And I think it would really do the reputation of the referees a lot of good if they would actually answer those questions, and they would actually explain their reasoning. But they seem to be much more in the camp of MLB umpires of just being like, well, we're just like the arbiters of justice, and that's the way it goes. And that's, I think, really unfortunate.
It is definitely unfortunate and it's annoying, but it's where we are right now. But I guess I got sidetracked, but I was saying Obed's going to be out for this game, which probably means João Paulo is going to go back into the formation. It'll be interesting to see how the Sounders handle that because Christian Roldan has been starting in place as João Paulo basically for the last couple months. And I imagine that João Paulo will move back into this more of the sixth position, and Christian will be sort of his old position, which was more of an 8. And I just really have liked what we've seen from Christian as a defensive midfielder to the point where I'm totally comfortable going into next season with him as the starting there. But I will note this is a different position for him than he played previously when he was in the center midfield, which was much more of an offensive player than he has been asked to be lately. But he's looked like he's played this position his whole life, frankly.
Yeah, I understand both the reasons that you expect João Paulo to be the guy that gets the nod, and also to a lesser degree why he's the guy that's going to get the nod, but he's been so good at that position. And, I'm hoping that with some time to rest up and heal up, Joao Paulo is a little sharper than he had been before he got, injured and then relegated to the bench. But I would not complain if we saw Atencio.
I mean, I wouldn't either, but he's in concussion protocol right now. That's why
that's right.
He wasn't available, and it's unclear when he's going to get back into training. At this point, Brian was confident that he's reasonably confident that he'd be available for Monday's game. But if he's not training by Friday, I don't know how realistic it is that he's going to want to start him.
Yeah, that's completely reasonable. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that a lot of the things that made Christian not as attractive as of an option at the right midfield spot this season as he has been in the past are probably similar to maybe why he's more well suited to the 6 than an 8 at this point. But I fully have confidence he can do a job. And I think that his passing has been so good, and that's something that's going to translate pretty well. I don't think there's any reason to think that his passing is going to suffer from being slightly more advanced. And he's not going to have to do as much disrupting. And I think the way that the 8 plays in the Sounders attack, it's not like he's going to be crashing the box on every play, right? Like the 8 in the Sounders system plays a little more withdrawn just because they have a 10 occupying the more advanced space. So I'm totally comfortable with that central midfield, assuming that Joao Paulo is healthy and sharp and good to go.
Yeah. I am too. Well, I think that covers basically most of the stuff. Is there anything I'm forgetting here?
I don't think so. It was nice and cathartic to bitch about the referee. Now we can move on. But
right, yeah, that's hopefully the last time we spend that much of a show talking about the referee. It'll be interesting also to see how this playoff game between the Whitecaps and Timbers works out. I suppose we're probably Whitecaps fans, I suppose, aren't we?
I think so. I think that of the two, they probably have a better chance to knock off LAFC. I don't think either team has a great chance, but the Whitecaps played them pretty close the last time they played up in Vancouver. They lost, so maybe not super encouraging, but I just think they're a little bit better of a matchup. I don't know, but Portland just scores so much that the chaos they can create is definitely an X factor, but I don't think either of these teams have a chance in hell, frankly. So I'm a Whitecaps fan in the sense that I want Portland to be done for the year. So
fair enough. Well, that's probably a good place to call the show then. Thank you to our sponsor, Full Pool Wines. Thank you to our subscribers once again. I think we're going to try to do a live show maybe for the away leg of the playoff game. Basically, we'd probably do a watch party and then a live post-game show. So stay tuned for details on that. Wanted to encourage everyone. We created a new RSS feed for the show. We are going to be discontinuing the old private RSS feed. That is just go into the story. There's every story. Every time we post one of our podcasts on the site, there's information on how to follow that. I want to encourage everyone to follow that. If you're a paid subscriber, you can get that. And with all that said, thank you for supporting us through another regular season. Of course, we're going to be covering the playoffs as well, so we're not going anywhere, but always like to say that to folks. And with that, I'm Jeremiah Osjan signing off for Eric Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Audietis, and remember, you'll never get alone.
We love you. Let's win another one.